Hey, what's up, everyone? I just wanted to take a quick moment to say thank you to everyone who's watching out there. I really do appreciate it, as always. And I wanted to take a second to cover a few things before we get started. I promise I won't keep you long. Today's story is one that I've covered before here on YouTube and over on TikTok when I was still active over there. Now, when I did those videos originally, they were really short, only about 3 minutes or so, I want to say. So I never really fully got into some of the details leading up to the event or the aftermath. And it was something I always promised to do in the future, so here we are. Now, if you've been on this channel before, you know I've been covering stories like this since the very beginning, whether it be Minnerly Soriano, Jessica Guzman, or Tamiqua Gutierrez. These are stories that we have to keep telling. The details are eerily similar. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that many who have been convicted of crimes just like this can someday go free. It sounds unbelievable, but it's true. One day they can be free to roam among you and your family, even be your next door neighbor. So when I tell these stories, it's important to not only remember these names, but remember these faces, because one day they may be living among you. And I'm pretty sure that's something that nobody here wants. With that being said, I do have to warn that today's story contains some of the worst details I've ever had to cover on this channel. And if you're not prepared to listen to that, I completely understand. But for everyone else jumping in, viewer discretion is strongly advised.
Mother of Jessica Guzman arrived at the St. John Vianney Church, clutching her daughter's favorite doll. Little Jessica was found murdered along the Bronx River Parkway on Wednesday, just days before her 11th birthday. She apparently had been asphyxiated.
A Passaic County sheriff is on the side of the people who want justice in the rape and murder of little Davina Janeo. Chaos broke out in the courtroom yesterday during Conrad Jeffrey's arraignment.
In recent months, children have lost their lives, and the blame could go to a justice system that allows hardened criminals to fall through the cracks and return to the streets.
Instead, it's just the numbers, the cold data, that suggest the law may not have lived up to the expectations at the start.
Do is lock them up and throw away the key. But they're not doing that. So if they're not going to do that, at least let us know who they are so we can watch them.
Good evening. A Perth family has just begun a brave fight to keep their daughter's up behind bars. The horrific of little Sofia Rodriguez at a Canning Vale shopping centre shocked Perth. Now her Dante Arthurs is just months away from possible parole. Sophia's family and supporters are calling for the public's help to make sure Arthurs stays in jail.
In October of 1990, 34 years ago, a 10-year-old girl from the Bronx by the name of Jessica Guzman crossed paths with a familiar face, someone who would then take her life in cold blood. Guilty of committing the horrible act was 29-year-old Alejandro Henriquez, and she wasn't his only victim. He was known as the monster that stalked the streets of the Bronx, New York. He wasn't the first in this city, and he wouldn't be the last. In May of 1993, 7-year-old Davina Henao would cross paths with a complete stranger who lured her away from her home and savagely ended her life in a matter of minutes. The monster responsible in that case was a 40-year-old man named Conrad Jeffrey, someone with a very violent past who had once lured a 14-year-old girl to train tracks only to violate her at knife point. The sickening crime would leave New Jersey shaken. Just 2 months after that, New Jersey was once again left devastated when 6-year-old Latasha Goodman would meet an eerily similar fate, having her life brutally taken after being lured away by a monster by the name of David Cooper, a career criminal with a history of trying to violate women. Now, when it comes to the tri-state area, those last 2 cases in New Jersey gained a lot of attention for a short period of time. There were a lot of talks of making major changes to avoid this from happening again. But just a year after Latasha Goodman and Davina Henao's lives were brutally taken, it would happen again, when 7-year-old Megan Kenka was lured into a home, violated, and slain in cold blood by monster Jesse Timendekis, someone with a history of depraved acts toward young girls. The tragedy would result in the creation of Megan's Law. It isn't hard to immediately tell what all these cases have in common. Innocent children who all cross paths with pure evil. People who all had a history of heinous and depraved acts toward kids. And in most cases, the community had no idea that these people were even living among them. And in June of 2006, after countless cases just like these, not only in the tri-state area, but all over the world, the suburb of Canning Vale, Australia, would find themselves overcome with grief and absolute outrage when an innocent 8-year-old girl would find herself in the hands of a stranger, and his only intention was to cause overwhelming pain. On today's episode of Evil Intentions, this is The Evil Among Us, the story of Sofia Rodriguez-Urrutia Shu.
Had left her family for just 10 minutes when Dante Arthurs followed her into a toilet block at Canning Vale shopping centre and strangled her to death.
Sofia Rodriguez-Urrutia Shu was born on November 11th of 1997 and resided in Canning Vale, Western Australia. Around the year 2006, Canning Vale was home to a little over 23,000 residents, mostly families of English, Australian, Chinese, Italian, and Indian descent, among others. The area was once mostly farmland, with gardens and dairy farms until the 1970s, when things would start to change into more of a residential neighborhood, with everything from restaurants to shopping centers. Canning Vale was home to Sofia and her family. She was just 8 years old. She had a baby sister, an older sister, and an older brother. Her mother was a stay-at-home mom, taking care of the children full-time, while their father often traveled back and forth to Hong Kong, taking care of things for the family's business. The family of 6 were a lot like others in Canning Vale, a loving family who worked hard, parents who wanted the best for their kids. Sofia was described as a beautiful and thoughtful child, somewhat shy, and as innocent as can be. A child with a vibrant imagination. She attended the Mater Christi Primary School at 340 Yajabop Road, right next to the Mater Christi Parish, where her family were also members. At school, Sofia was popular. She got along with all of her classmates, especially her 2 best friends, about the same age as her. She was also a very good student. Teachers often said that she was quiet, but also involved, truly pleasant to be around, never a distraction to the other students. Sofia was also described by loved ones as a happy, normal kid. While Canning Vale was the family's home, they had also spent some time living in China for about a year or so. Now this was a whole new experience for the family, but they made sure to create fond memories together while there. Now there were obviously big differences in lifestyle while living in China, but they enjoyed the experience. It made it much easier for Sofia's father to do business without having to travel back and forth and leaving his family so often, which was a good thing. But Canning Vale was always home. Her father recalls the times he would pick Sofia up from school on his electric scooter, something similar to a Vespa. She would put on her helmet and laugh in excitement as her dad drove her around. Like a lot of children her age, the simple things made her happy, like spending time with the family dog, Cookie, or maybe eating as much watermelon as she could. It was her favorite. Spending time with her siblings, getting tucked in at night, and being read her favorite bedtime stories. She always felt safe and loved by her family. Even at the tender age of just 8 years old, she was growing up to be generous and loving, always respectful of everyone, and known to be polite. It was said that if for any reason Sofia wasn't feeling well or got hurt playing around, she never complained. She might shed a tear or two, but it wasn't like her to make a big deal of it, even if expressing that was totally fine. She was also very patient. Her parents recall a time when Sofia lost a tooth, and she waited in excitement for the tooth fairy to visit at night so they could leave money under the pillow. She waited patiently for over 2 weeks before finding $5 in place of the tooth. That childlike wonder was always a big part of her personality. Like many of us at her age, she believed in the tooth fairy, Santa Claus. Anything was possible. She was completely free of any of the unpleasant parts of life that can often disrupt how a child grows up. She was just a kid living life, protected, loved, and she had a very bright future ahead of her. Life was pleasant and simple for Sofia and her loved ones, but that was all about to change, because on Monday, June 26th of 2006, at 4:03 p.m., she would cross paths with a complete stranger, someone who had been lurking the streets of Canning Vale, and his sickening intentions would lead to one of the most disturbing and horrific crimes that Western Australia has ever seen. On that afternoon, Sofia's uncle picked her up from school, accompanied by her 2 older siblings, so they could get a little shopping done. They would then be on their way to the Livingston Marketplace. The location is a shopping center with everything from clothing stores to bakeries to cafes and restaurants. There have been some expansions over the years since. They made their way into Big Woolworth, more commonly known as Big W, a popular department store in Australia. They spent some time walking up and down the aisles to the store, grabbing a few things before they were ready to leave. As they were finishing up their shopping, Sofia would ask her uncle if she could go to the restroom. They were done and ready to check out, so he told her she could go as he and her siblings waited on the line. From where they were standing, he had a clear view of the door that would lead to the bathrooms, right by where shoppers would grab and drop off their shopping carts. He kept a close eye as she made her way there. As they waited, close to 10 minutes had passed, and Sofia still hadn't returned. Her older sister realized that she was taking too long, so she walked over to the women's bathroom to see if she could find her, but her sister was nowhere to be found. She walked back to her uncle and brother and told them that she couldn't find Sofia. They immediately got off that line and went back to the restrooms looking for her. Her uncle checked the men's bathroom and found nothing, while her sister checked the women's bathroom once more. They called Sofia's name over and over, but there was no reply from her. A few feet away was the accessible bathroom for those that may be shopping in a wheelchair or who had injuries. It was occupied, and there were sounds coming from inside, someone moving and water running from the faucet. Her brother knocked on the door to see if maybe his sister was inside, but the voice that replied to him came from a man. They were beginning to worry. They were sure that she must have left the area without them seeing, and maybe went to the other bathroom on the other side of the store. So her brother stood there in case she showed up, while her sister and uncle checked the other bathrooms on the opposite end of the store. There was still no sign of Sofia. The search would become much more urgent, with her family now alerting the information desk at Big W so they could make an announcement of a lost child in the store. By now, they weren't just searching the store. They were canvassing the parking lot and surrounding area, hoping she would be found as soon as possible. Nothing felt right, and it was hard to imagine that she would make it very far in just a few minutes. Something was very wrong. Her brother had a gut feeling that he should return to the first bathrooms that they had searched, so he did just that. He returned to the area and checked the bathrooms again, and could only hear commotion coming from inside the accessible bathroom, just like a few minutes ago. The sounds of someone moving around, running water, and the toilet flushing over and over. After a few minutes of this, the door to that bathroom opened, and a man started to walk out. He was big, and it looked like his shirt was wet. This man would look at Sofia's brother right in his face, before quickly making his way down the corridor so he could leave the area. With the door to the bathroom now wide open, Sofia's brother could see her lying on the floor, and she had no clothes on. Her brother, only 14 years old himself, started running after the man, knowing he was just inside of that bathroom with his little sister. The man was already by the exit doors and leaving. He turned around and looked at her little brother one last time before running into the parking lot and driving off. Her brother quickly made his way back to the bathroom, where Sofia was still on the floor, motionless, with her body somewhat contorted, and inside of a garbage can near the doorway was Sofia's school uniform. Her brother went to get her uncle. They came back and tried everything they could to revive her by giving her mouth to mouth, but it was too late. Out of nowhere, just like that, Sofia was gone. It would be only minutes before the entire marketplace was considered a crime scene. The word made its way around the shopping center very quickly. Word of a young girl who had been viciously attacked by some unknown male, a parent's worst nightmare. This area wasn't known for anything like this. Information was still being verified as authorities checked surveillance and investigated, but the one thing that everyone was sure of was that a child's life was taken, and it happened right here. Now, what they didn't know was that the details to be released later on would be among the worst that they would ever hear. Grief and shock quickly set in for her family. It was the very last thing anyone expected. It was truly unsettling just how quickly the afternoon shifted from pleasant to pure horror. She was fine just a few minutes before this, This all happened extremely fast. Calls were made to Sofia's mother, who couldn't believe what she was hearing, a call no parent ever hopes to get. Sofia's father was away on business in Hong Kong when it all took place, but he would book a flight as soon as he heard, and he was back in Canning Vale the next morning. The family was obviously absolutely devastated by what happened. It happened so quickly that it didn't even feel real. There were so many unanswered questions when it came to everything. Authorities who had been on the scene for just a few hours were already very confident that they knew where to look to find the man that was seen leaving the bathroom. The cameras that had been placed outside of the bathroom weren't working, so those offered no information. Authorities were on the scene until the early morning hours of the following day, and at around 5 a.m., their investigation pointed them in a very specific direction. Checking surveillance cameras outside of the shopping center helped them a great deal. The Canning Vale home was searched, and in one of the bedrooms, inside of a dresser, they found a bag that contained some latex gloves, handcuffs, a small knife, duct tape, and even more disturbingly, a collection of pictures, all of young girls, along with their addresses. Everything in this bag belonged to a 21-year-old man by the name of Dante Wyndham Authors, and this is where he lived, with his parents. This wasn't what authorities believed to be a coincidence. A young girl was brutally assaulted, her life taken in a horrific manner, and here was a grown man with a disturbing collection of photos of young girls. He was said to be stalking up to 12 girls who were around the same age as Sofia. He was immediately arrested and brought in for questioning. When they looked more into Arthur's past, they were disgusted and even more frustrated. Rumors would immediately spread over the internet about him being involved in the slaying of a 2-year-old boy by the name of James Boger back in 1993 in Liverpool. People began to say that he took James's life and was given a new identity and relocated to Canning Vale when he was released. That never happened, even if it's something you'll still see people mention today. In reality, there was no connection, and he had nothing to do with that. The media was even forced to address it, publicly stating that there was nothing connecting the two cases. But regardless, Arthur's history with kids was disturbing. More evidence piled on, and more information about Arthur's past was publicly broadcasted over the news and in the papers. It turns out he had a history of this. On December 14th of 2003, at the age of 19, he was arrested for an assault on a child, an 8-year-old girl, just like Sofia. This was at a park right across the road from where he lived. He came up from behind her, placed his hand over her mouth, and dragged her into the bushes, where he groped her. She bit his hand and was able to run away, making a quick escape. To the police, there was no doubt that he was guilty of this assault, but the problem was that when they interviewed him about it, the methods they used would result in the charges being dropped, since it was stated that they forced a confession out of him. In addition to this, a pair of shorts that he was wearing during the young girl's attack had her blood on them, but they were never tested for DNA. In fact, the blood went completely unnoticed the first time around. This could have helped convict him years before 2006, when he did this to Sofia, but unfortunately, that never happened. All of this was extremely hard for the family to accept, and the details concerning Sofia's brutal attack would only make things much worse. When medical experts examined Sofia's body, they would find that both of her arms and her legs had been broken. They stated that both of her arms were likely broken while she was still alive, but there was no way to know if she was still conscious. Her broken legs looked to be severely twisted to a point where they broke in the other direction, which is why she looked contorted. Her left arm also became dislocated from when Authors savagely ripped her uniform off. There was severe bruising around her neck from when he squeezed the life out of her, putting all his weight onto her, making sure she couldn't cry for help by crushing her larynx, which would contain her vocal cords. She couldn't cry out. It just wasn't possible. They would also find that Sofia was brutally violated to a point where she had internal injuries. While her brother was just feet away, knocking on that door, shouting her name along with her uncle and sister, she was on the other side, being savagely attacked. The sounds of someone moving inside that were heard as they searched, that was Arthur's, taking Sofia's life. An attack that was said to last anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. She was so close to safety, yet so far. Absolutely horrible to even imagine. Authorities and medical examiners questioning Arthur would find out that he worked at the marketplace the night before. After a disagreement with his mother the following afternoon, he left his home, went to Livingston Marketplace, and went into Big W. He couldn't afford to buy anything and just sort of looked around. He had to save his money for a vacation, one that he was supposed to be taking a few days later. This is when he made his way to the restrooms. When he was on his way out is when he saw Sofia, and in an instant, the first thing that came to mind was pulling her into the bathroom with him and carrying out one of the most disgusting attacks imaginable. Arthurs, who was said to be diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, said he only had brief recollections of what he had done to Sofia. He said he remembered seeing his hands around her throat and began to panic when he saw that she wasn't breathing. I tried to shake a response from her. Then her arms broke. I heard a large snapping noise. He then stated that he remembered taking her small body and throwing her into the toilet as he began to tear off her clothes. After this, he said that he used his finger to penetrate her and remembered seeing blood. Her severe injuries and Arthur's story just didn't add up. After more investigation, it was clear that he knew exactly what he was doing and had every intention of doing it. He would make admissions about violating and attacking her, but tried real hard to downplay it. It was something that he had tried before, and he was free to try it again. And this time, the end result was tragedy. A brutal attack on an innocent child, and little Sofia paying with her life. The loss was felt all across Australia, bringing strong emotions out of anyone who heard her story. This child had her whole life ahead of her, and now, instead of making plans with her for the future, her family was planning her funeral. On Monday, July 3rd of 2006, funeral services were held for Sofia at the Mater Christi Church, right by her school. More than 500 people stood inside of the church, with hundreds more outside. It was said that over 2,000 people would attend. They all watched as some of her classmates donned bright costumes, standing around Sofia's small white casket. They would then perform an Indonesian dance routine that they had been selected for weeks prior, a dance that they were supposed to be performing with their friend Sofia. She was very excited about it, as were they. The last thing they ever expected was that they would be performing this dance at her funeral. Some of those in attendance didn't know Sofia or her family personally, but the news of this horrible crime had touched everyone. People in the community wanted to show their support for her family. It also made them want to hold their children a little tighter, unable to fully grasp the pain that this family must have been going through, what they had to be feeling. Many felt that a child shouldn't have been left to go to the bathroom by herself. Of course, keeping an eye on your children is the safest way to be, but the truth is, they simply didn't expect that something so horrible would ever happen. The family was obviously devastated and still struggling with this loss, knowing their little girl met such a horrible fate at the hands of a monster that should have been put away long before this. But they harbored no hatred toward the police and their procedures, even when the police commissioner at the time admitted that they made huge errors in how they handled Arthur the first time he was arrested back in 2003. Their lives were turned upside down, and they were struggling with debilitating grief. They just wanted to make sure they remembered Sofia for who she was, rather than the horrific way her life was taken. All they had left now were their memories of her, the pictures of her taken over the years, the better times. They were much too hurt to speak at her service. Instead, the family would write a letter, and they made copies of that letter to pass out to the mourners at the service. One part of that letter said the following: "We don't fully know why she was taken now, not earlier, not later, and in this way, but we know there is a reason, and we ask Sofia to help us find the road that will bring us together once again in heaven when our time comes to be reunited with her. We will miss Sofia and keep her presence in our hearts every day to help us feel stronger. We know that she only wants us to be strong, united, and happy." Dozens of pink and blue balloons would then be released at the end of her service. Her body was then taken to Fremantle Cemetery for cremation, with her ashes to be buried at the Chapel of the Innocent at Mater Christi. After little Sofia was laid to rest, still struggling with this tragedy, her family was kept in the loop about her case by a police liaison who over time would find himself becoming very close to them. Every last detail of the case stuck with him, and it was clear that he cared a great deal. He made sure to always get information to the family before it hit the news, so there were never any surprises. While the weight of all the grief wasn't becoming any easier, this was far from over. They wanted to be sure that justice would be served, but they couldn't bear to be reminded of the horrible details whenever they entered a courtroom. They would instead be represented by the head priest from Mater Christi and the police liaison that they had become close to. They would be the ones to handle all the media attention that the case was getting and organized fundraising events in Sofia's name, allowing the family to have their privacy and to mourn in peace, or as best as they possibly could. Arthurs was at first charged with both willful murder and 2 counts of violating a child and unlawful detention. He was supposed to enter a plea of guilty, but instead, in March of 2007, he entered a plea of not guilty to all of the charges. In July of 2007, a judge decided that due to all the media attention Sofia's case had received, there would be a trial by judge alone, no jury. While those decisions were being made, his plea status was still a problem. In August of 2007, a judge presiding over the case would say that a lot of the admissions made by authors weren't admissible because of, quote, persistent importunity, meaning that authorities were relentless in their questioning, almost the same thing that allowed him to go free in 2003. Unexpectedly, Arthur's charges would be downgraded. Prosecutors and his lawyers entered into a deal that would now see him charged with taking Sofia's life, but in their words, it couldn't be proven if it was his intention or not, so the charges went from willful murder to just murder. The big difference was that willful would have meant that taking her life was his idea from the start. Those charges of him violating her, they were also now gone. A judge stated that it couldn't be proven whether authors violated Sofia before or after her life was taken, and under the law, he couldn't be charged with the offense if she was already deceased. To Sofia's family, it made no difference. He was a monster, and he had to pay for what he had done. They were happy that there was no trial because it meant that their son wouldn't have to testify. It would have been a lot for him to get on that stand and have to talk about what he saw. But this wasn't what they expected. The fact was, he did do this to her. Whether she was alive or not shouldn't have been the deciding factor. But in the end, it's all he would be charged with. In September of 2007, he was officially charged and would plead guilty to taking Sofia's life and unlawful detention. On November 7th of 2007, Dante Wyndham Arthurs was sentenced to life in prison, but he would be eligible for parole in as little as 13 years. The sentencing would spark outrage in the community. It raised major questions about the justice system and how exactly this person received such a light sentence. The only thing that Sofia's family could ever hope for is that he would remain behind bars forever, since for him to be released, an attorney general would have to sign off on it. It wasn't likely that anyone would actually sign to release him whenever the time came. But it's happened before, and it was like a dark cloud that loomed over Sofia's case and her family. In June of 2019, that day came. Arthurs was now eligible for release. From 2018 to 2019, a Change.org petition had more than 120,000 signatures, thousands of people expressing the need for Arthurs to remain in prison. A parole review board's recommendation also stated that Arthurs should never be set free. He had no place in society, and releasing him would be a huge mistake. Thankfully, the Attorney General at the time would agree. Arthurs would remain in prison for at least another 3 years. News of that decision was soon broadcasted all over the news.
A petition to keep Perth child killer Dante Arthurs locked up has exploded overnight, gathering tens of thousands of signatures. 13 years after brutally murdering Sofia Rodriguez, Arthurs will be eligible for parole, with child protection advocates calling for tougher sentences.
The brutal rape and murder of 8-year-old Sofia Rodriguez-Urrutia Shu in a Canning Vale shopping centre bathroom sent shockwaves across the nation. After spending just 13 years of a life sentence behind bars for the horrific crime, her killer Dante Arthurs will be eligible for parole.
People still remember, and it's beyond belief that this man would actually be released into the community.
An online petition to keep Arthurs locked up is climbing by the tens of thousands. Signatures more than doubling overnight, calling for the Attorney General to reject any bid for freedom.
consideration for parole means that there is a possibility that this man will be let into the community again. It's happened before that high-end sex offenders have been let out into the community.
Arthur's disturbing criminal history was brought to light after Sofia's death, with allegations of other crimes targeting children. Attorney General John Quigley will soon review Arthur's life sentence, telling 9 News the wishes of Sofia's family will weigh heavily in any decision that is made. It was this Canning Vale shopping centre where Sofia's life was brutally taken from her and her family. This year, the little girl should have been marking a milestone, turning 21.
I believe that there need to be stricter sentences, and with high-end crimes like this one, should be indefinite sentence.
Good evening. A Perth family has just begun a brave fight to keep their daughter's killer behind bars. The horrific murder of little Sofia Rodriguez at a Canning Vale shopping centre shocked Perth. Now her killer, Dante Arthurs, is just months away from possible parole. Nathan Brooks, Sofia's family and supporters are calling for the public's help to make sure Arthurs stays in jail.
Michael, this shocked Perth. Sofia Rodriguez-Urrutia Shu was just 8 years old when she was strangled and sexually assaulted in a Canning Vale shopping centre toilet in 2006. The then schoolgirl should have been turning 21 this year. Instead, her family and friends are fighting to keep her killer behind bars. They've launched an online petition asking for the public's support. Dante Arthurs was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 13 years. That parole review date is now less than 12 months away. Friends and family are pleading with the Attorney General not to release her killer. In a statement, John Quigley told 9 News Sofia's death was one of the most shocking and brutal crimes in recent times. The wishes of Sofia's family will weigh heavily in any decision I might make with regard to this shocking case. And Michael, the online petition on change.org has already gathered more than close to 9,000 signatures in just over 24 hours.
He was responsible for one of WA's most callous murders, and now child killer Dante Arthurs will be kept behind bars even though he was eligible for parole next week. The now 34-year-old strangled 8-year-old Sofia Rodriguez-Urrutia Shu in the toilets of a Canning Vale shopping centre. Louise Rennie, the parole board recommended he stay behind bars.
Michael, an online petition to keep Dante Arthurs behind bars has gathered more than 120,000 signatures over the last year. Sofia Rodriguez-Urrutia Shu had left her family for just 10 minutes when Dante Arthurs followed her into a toilet block at Canning Vale shopping centre and strangled her to death. That was June 2006, and next week he's eligible to be released, but the parole board has ruled against it. Attorney General John Quigley says he wholeheartedly supports the decision. It's also said to be a relief for Sofia's family, who has been notified of the decision.
Arthurs would be reconsidered for parole again in 2022. A parole board would again decide that he shouldn't be let out. He would remain behind bars for another 3 years. He's expected to be reconsidered in mid-2025. While Sofia's family were relieved each time that Arthurs was denied, the real struggle is having to relive this horrific ordeal every few years, having to be reminded that this monster is alive and well, with a chance at freedom. Even if that chance is slim, it's still a chance. Sofia will never have a second chance. She'll never be able to be with her family again. She'll never be with her friends, never have a chance to spend time with her dog. She won't be here to get excited about scooter rides with her father or bedtime stories from her mother. She'll never be able to be with her siblings or even become old enough to see what she wanted to be when she grew up. Just 8 years old. It would be nice to live in a world where a child can go to the bathroom in a public space and not have to worry about evil forces lurking in the shadows, looking to take advantage of them. Unfortunately, and very sadly, that's not the world we live in. It's hard to accept and fathom, but that evil does exist. And when it goes undetected, when it's left to roam free and rear its ugly head, the results are often nothing short of horrific. From Jessica Guzman to Davina Henao to Latasha Goodman to Megan Kenka, to little Sofia, all children who came face to face with monsters. From New York City to New Jersey to Australia, this isn't just a local issue, it's worldwide. These children and many others could still be here today if certain actions were taken. The safety of these children should always remain a priority. It took a long time for Sofia's parents to speak about everything, but when they did, they made it clear that they harbored no hatred for the monster responsible. Still, they never want to see him go free. Sofia's memory is kept alive through her loving family. They choose to remember their happy times with her, her laugh, her vibrance, and her innocence. She's remembered by her friends, some of whom carry pendants with Sofia's face on them. Inscribed on each are the words, Sofia, best friends forever. Her short life meant much more than those last few minutes where she came face to face with someone depraved, someone who had the worst intentions in mind, an act he was finally able to carry out as soon as the chance presented itself. The moment she walked down that corridor and made her way to that bathroom, her fate was sealed, all at the hands of pure evil, and he should never go free. Sofia's family stated on several occasions that they hope horrific events like this could be prevented in the future. It was a big part of the healing process and being able to move forward from it. That's why it's so important to share her story, hers and as many others as possible, because you never know when you might find yourself living next to someone with a terrible past just like this, someone who could do it all again. It shouldn't even be possible, and no child should ever have to suffer this way. If alive today, Sofia would be 26 years old and celebrating her 27th birthday next month. Rest in peace, Sofia Rodriguez-Urrutia Shu, and my deepest condolences go out to her family and loved ones. You aren't forgotten.